What's up, nerds and nerdettes and wee little nerdlings all? It's your buddy Big Johnny G from Two Gun Pixie presents Legendary Gaming and my friends. I am back! I'm back! It's only been 24 hours or so since I uploaded the last one. Missed everyone. How you doing? Alright, so we are back for another Tabletop Takeout Tuesday. As we know, this is a series that isn't a review, it isn't a how-to play, it's simply me telling you about games I like. I am using this as a platform. This is like when I want my players to play a game that they haven't played yet. This is how I feel like I would describe the games I really like and I really want to get to that table. Now today has a game that could be another game. So could be. When I was a kid growing up, I remember being at my grandparents' house on the weekend with my dad, and I remember us watching a television sitcom called Hogan's Heroes. Bum 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 ba bum 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 ba bum 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 ba bum. Man, that was a funny show. It was. If you're not familiar with the show, Hogan's Heroes was a show that took place during World War II, and it was set in a Nazi prisoner of war camp. And all the characters in it were playing French or American prisoners of war. And they were secretly working together as a group right under the Commandant's nose to help the Allied forces. They did everything from blowing up German munitions on secret missions, from helping other POWs, important POWs, escape back to London. It was a very fun show. It turns out, I found out years later, that a lot of the cast were actually people that spent time in a concentration camp or an internment camp during World War II at the hands of the Nazis. And they loved doing this show because it was a way to depower the Nazis, to demystify them, to make them look like fools. And it worked. It was a funny show. And there's a game I got about 2 years ago. And me and the 20-sided Warriors love it. And it has a definite feel like Hogan's Heroes. And that game is called Escape from Colditz. Now, this game is a historical game. And there's a lot of historical board games on the market. But what makes this stand out, what makes this in the minority, I believe, of historical games, is that it's an actual moment in history. It's a real, actual moment in history. You know, a lot of the historical games take place around a time period. Like Francis Drake is a historical game, board game that me and the 20-sided Warriors enjoy. And it's a historical game all about Francis Drake. Well, this is about a specific moment in World War II. And this is the moment of escape. Now, what makes this such a big deal is during World War II, Colditz was considered the most unescapable POW camp in all of Germany. And it was feared. If you were sent to this camp, its reputation was enough to demoralize you. But yet, during the course of the war, there were some 25 or 30 POWs that did actually escape. French, Polish, British. There weren't any Americans during World War II that I'm aware of that were at this base. But that's what this game is based on. It's based on a book, which was turned into a movie and I believe a mini-series over in England, I think, maybe back in the 60s? That sounds familiar to me. And it's based on a true account of Major Pat Reed, who was one of the individuals that had escaped from Colditz. And it is probably my favorite escape game. The way it's set up, because it has that deep feel and touch of realism, because everything in the game is based on the real attempts that were made by the POWs during their time there. Another thing that makes it interesting was at first the POWs didn't trust each other. They didn't know if they could trust each other. Like the French didn't know if that was really a Polish POW, English POW, or if it was a Nazi spy. So they didn't trust each other at first, so they really bumped heads in their escape attempts until finally they all decided to get together, and each of the commanding officers of each of the POW groups took one of his lieutenants, so to speak, and turned him into what was called the escape officer. And if you had an escape attempt, you had to go to your escape officer and explain this to them. And then they went to the other escape officers, and they all sat down and made sure that no one's escape attempt was going to bungle up anyone else's. Now, let me tell you something. This is based on realism, and yet it is hysterical. And it's not supposed to be. Not the game so much, but the game has a miraculous secondary book besides the rule book. It has a history book of Colditz, of its history during World War II as a POW camp. And reading this, I just got to say this. First of all, this history book on Colditz is almost worth the price of the game itself. If you're a World War II buff, a history buff, or just a war buff in general, this history book is going to be almost worth it by itself. But reading through this is hysterical, and that's what makes me think of Hogan's Heroes. Because the real-life attempts that they tried, they range from all the normal things that you could think of, like escape tunnels, like getting bed sheets tied up together and going out the window. Sure, they tried the basic stuff. But then it goes into these things that you would think came right out of a sitcom itself. Like there was a case where one of the POW officers had his wife was slowly sending him pieces of female clothing and makeup and even a long blonde wig, until after weeks or months he had everything together. He just got himself in drag and walked right out the front gate like he had been here to visit someone, and now he's just a local German lady and leaving. And there's another one. My favorite one is the doppelganger one. I can't remember what they call it, but it's so they ended up getting a POW inmate who had more than a passing resemblance to one of the commanders at the base. So they slowly pieced together and sewed up Nazi uniforms. And one night, this guy went out dressed as the officer, the Nazi officer, and basically went up to the front gate with two other POWs dressed as soldiers, Nazi soldiers, and went up to the front gate and was like, "There is escape attempt in the back. Take all the soldiers and go stop them." And like the soldiers listened to their order. What do you expect them to do? This guy spent months. He spent months studying the commander, his mannerisms, his inflections, the specific words and the pattern of his speech. This guy studied everything. And it would have worked except for one guard that wouldn't give up his orders not to leave post. And the POW ended up getting shot. He survived, apparently, but he ended up getting shot because of his trouble. But this is like a sitcom. And these are all real-life attempts, things that were really done. Right at the end of the war, they didn't get a chance to do it, but two of the POW guys actually spent their months and months and months in there building a wooden glider. And then they took an old tub, filled it with concrete, and their plan was they were going to slingshot seesaw style and go sailing over the wall. Now, the funny thing is, a number of years ago, I believe it was in Great Britain, there was an attempt where they recreated this glider because it went missing. They had it after the war, it went missing, so they recreated it using the exact same means and everything, and they seesawed it, and it worked. These guys would have glided right over the wall, landed right out in the field, and they would have been running. Who knows if they would have got caught, because a lot of the guys that escaped did end up getting caught later on, but it would have worked. This is amazing. This is hysterical. Now, the game is not hysterical, but the game uses every single bit of real life. You know, there's no fantasy in the game. There's no, I want to say imagination. Of course, there's obviously imagination, but I think you know what I mean. There's no flights of fancy in the game. Every way that you can possibly escape in the game are real-life attempt ways that were actually attempted or succeeded by the POWs at Colditz. So it's another good thing about the game is it's a one versus all game, and those are definitely fun. So one player is going to be playing the German security officer, and the other players are all playing an escape officer, and you have pawns, and your pawns, depending on the number of players of the game, from 2 to 6, you could have 8, 7, 6, 5, 4 number of pawns, and as long as you get 2 of them to an escape spot, then that player is going to win the game. And So the one versus all works really good. Has a great card system where the prisoners get a chance to take cards, and some of the cards are going to give them opportunities. They're actually called opportunity cards. While the security officer is going to be getting the security cards, which allow them to do things like call a roll call. If there's a prisoner outside the wall, you just roll 2 dice, and if they're within range of the 2 dice, then these guys are going to get shot. You can put people in solitary confinement. Everything works logically, and that's what makes it fun. On top of everything else, I think that is the ultimate thing that makes it fun. Escape from Colditz is a great, an amazingly great escape game. You're gonna sit down for a few hours. Depending on how many players you have with it. Obviously, a 2-player game shouldn't take you 3-4 hours. You know what I mean? But yeah, you sit down for a few hours with your friends playing this game, and the back and forth, the cat and mouse in this game. That, I think, is probably the most addictive thing. On top of the fact that it's all cat and mouse in reality. And in the back of your head, you're thinking, this is real. This really did happen. Can I do it better? I don't know. Can you do it better? Can you escape from Colditz better than real life POWs escaped? Escape from Colditz. You got to get this to the table. You got to play this game. You are going to have fun with it, and it's the kind of game that you're going to be able to put to the table any time, because every time is going to play out differently. The replayability of this game that's all it is replayability. I mean, yeah, there's a deck of cards. You're going to be drawing the same cards over and over, but the strategy, how these cards are used, where you're moving, it's going to change every time. I can't possibly see how 2 games are ever going to be exactly the same unless you plan it out that way, move by move. But even then, the rolling of the dice is going to change things up. So it's a really fun game. So I'm glad I had this moment to tell you about Escape from Colditz. And that game is by Osprey Games. I really think you should get to the table. I think you should try it. It's going to be fun. It's going to be worth your time. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for subscribing to Two Gun Pixie. Thank you for checking us out on Facebook. We're on Twitter. And as you know, we try to be on Instagram whenever we can. I'm your buddy Big Johnny G. Two Gun Pixie presents Legendary Gaming, and my friends, it is time. I am out of here.